An oyster stew is really more like an oyster soup, and most recipes are nothing more than hot milk and good oysters and maybe a pat of butter. But some of the original oyster stew recipes include something called Benne seed, which is an heirloom form of sesame seeds. It adds an amazing depth of flavor from start to finish, less than 20 minutes. So I started by cooking some good quality bacon until it was crisp. And I've removed it from the pot, but I've left that delicious bacon fat in here. And that's gonna be the base to start sauteing my ingredients. I have 2 bunches of scallions, and I've chopped up the whites, and I'm gonna save the greens to use as a garnish in the end. Whenever you add onions to a pot to start cooking, always add a pinch of salt. That little bit of salt will encourage them to turn tender and get done a little bit more quickly. The next thing is some flour. I love to use rice flour in this recipe, but regular all-purpose flour is gonna work just fine as well. And then stir to coat the flour with some of that delicious bacon fat. When you add flour to a recipe like this, it takes 2 full minutes to cook out the raw taste from the flour to give you a nice, smooth sauce when you're done. Now it's time to add some liquid. I have taken a pint of freshly shucked oysters, and I'm straining them so that their liquid can drain away. That liquid is called oyster liquor. And there's not gonna be enough liquid from the oysters alone to go in the soup, so I'm gonna add a little bit more liquid. You have choices. You can use a really high quality bottled clam juice, chicken stock, a seafood stock, whatever you have. So drain your oysters into a measuring cup so you can see how much you have, and then add enough additional liquid to total about 2.5 cups. There we go. So slowly add your liquid to your sizzling flour mixture. And then we're just gonna stir until this turns smooth and gets thick and bubbly. So once this starts to bubble, you can tell that it's good and thick. It looks a little bit like gravy, and then it is time to add our Benne seeds. Now, Benne seeds are an original form of sesame seeds, and although you can buy them, it's much easier to find high quality, unhulled sesame seeds. And I toasted these in the oven till they smelled like sesame oil. Their fragrance will let you know when they're perfectly toasted. And then we're gonna add a little bit of cream. Now, once you've added the cream, make sure you lower your heat because we don't want this stew to bubble anymore. We wanna have a nice wisp of steam coming off of it, but we don't want it to boil. Now, the Benne seeds may have plenty of flavor on their own, but sometimes we need a little bit more of that sesame flavor, and the easiest way to get that is with toasted sesame oil. Now, toasted sesame oil is delicious, but it's robustly flavored. So start with just a little bit, just a few drops, and then taste your soup until it's just as richly flavored with sesame as you like it. I got lucky on the first try. That's great. And now we're gonna add a little bit of hot sauce. This isn't to make it spicy so much as it is to lift the flavors. And your stew is almost done. The very last thing you put in are the oysters themselves. Now, these are raw oysters. They've been shucked, but they're raw, but they cook in only about a minute. How long your oysters are going to take depends on their size, but almost no oysters are gonna take longer than 2 minutes. You really want them to just warm up. That's about all that they need. The way you know an oyster is ready is when the edges just begin to curl a little bit. And while those oysters are warming up, I'm gonna add a little bit of fresh lemon juice. You can put a little in the pot. You might want to also save a little bit to put in each bowl when you're serving it. I like a big pinch of pepper in my oyster stew. Anything that has a beautiful creamy base like this loves a good pinch of pepper. Check an oyster. Oh, this is perfect. The edges have just begun to ruffle and curl a little bit. They're plump and juicy and warm through. And just like that, this stew is ready to serve. So now there's this wonderful brimming bowl of warm, freshly made oyster stew, and it's time for a few garnishes. I often add just a few more Benne seeds because their toasted flavor is so good in this. And then that bacon I cooked in the beginning to get those delicious drippings, it's time for it to go back into the bowl. And then our greens that we saved from the scallions, that's the perfect little bit of green to go on top. Now, I love to eat oyster stew with buttered saltine crackers. I know those cute little oyster crackers might be more traditional, but what I really like is this amazing stew. There's no doubt that it's an oyster stew, but those Benne seeds, those sesame seeds, that makes this extra special, and it's fast too.